Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing a game that was played against a 493 and a 546. So white is rated 493 and black is rated 546. So let's get started. The first move was e4. Again, this is a good move because you want to get a pawn in the center and open up lines for the bishop and the queen. Black moves pawn to e5. Good move. It gets the pawn in the center and also opens up lines for the bishop and the queen. Very good. White decides to move the knight to f3. Good move. It gets the knight in the center. When you're playing chess, you want to get all the knights and the bishops out and you want to move it toward the center. Knight to c6. Good move. And then pawn to d3. I'm not a big fan of this move. I mean, it is okay. The thing about this move is it opens up lines for this bishop, which is good, but also notice that now this bishop, it cannot get out. So my recommendation is instead of moving the pawn to d3, let's move the bishop to c4 or b5. And then after the bishop moves, then you can move the pawn to d3 and then you can get this bishop out. Okay, if you want me to analyze your chess game for free for this channel, please share the game with me. And also, if you like watching my videos, please subscribe to my channel. I greatly appreciate it. Okay, let's go back to the game now. So it was pawn to d3, knight to f3, that's good. And then pawn to c3. So it seems like white wants to move the pawn to d4. Black decides to move the bishop to c5. Another move that black can do is to move this pawn up 2 spaces to fight for the center. So we think that pawn to d5, this would also be a good move. Just notice that this knight cannot safely take the pawn on e5 because this knight's protecting it. But bishop to c5, pawn to d4, pawn takes. Okay, pawn takes. Again, it's not safe to take this pawn because white has 2 pieces that are protecting the pawn, and black only has 1 defender. So black decides to move the bishop to b4. It's checking the king, and then the knight goes to d2. Okay. Black decides to move the pawn to d5, but again, this is not the best move. You always want to ask, if I ask, can I safely capture a piece? Or can I safely capture any pieces? So pawn to d5, that's not the best move. Can you see what the best move is? The best move is for this knight to take this pawn. And you might be asking, no, it's not safe because the knight can just take it. Actually, this knight cannot take the knight on e4 because the bishop is pinning the knight to the king. So therefore, we can safely take this pawn, the pawn with the knight, right? But instead, black decides to go to d5. Okay. So what happens is pawn goes to a3, it attacks the bishop, and let's see what happens. Whoa, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I guess black wants to get fancy right now. It's like, okay, if you take my bishop, I'm gonna take your knight. It seems like this is what black wants to do. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, so pawn takes, and then after that, the pawn takes the bishop, pawn takes knight, knight takes, and then what happens is queen goes to e7. It's checking the king, and then the bishop goes there to block the check. That makes sense. And then the bishop goes to g4. Again, this is not the best move. You always want to ask, like, can I safely capture a piece? Can you see what black's best move is? This queen can safely just take this pawn for free, right? And it's also checking the king. That's why when you're playing chess, you always want to ask, like, can I safely capture any pieces? Right? So we could have just taken that. But black decided to move the bishop here. Notice that this bishop is pinning the knight to this queen. That means that if this knight ever moves, that would be a very bad idea, because then this bishop can just take the queen. That would not be good for white. But let's see what happened in the actual game. Okay, so bishop goes here. It unpins the knight. That's good because, as I told you before, the knight is pinned, and the bishop goes here. It unpins the knight. Okay, and then black moves the knight to e4. Again, my recommendation is, again, if you can safely take a piece for free, go ahead and do that. And it's also with check, so I don't really like this move. Let's just let's just go ahead and just take this pawn with check with the queen. But okay, knight goes to e4. White castles, and then black decides to castle on the queen's side. You have to be very careful when you castle queenside, especially when there's this rook here. This rook is attacking this pawn. If I was in this position, I would probably castle on the king's side, or I would probably just take this pawn. This just seems very risky again because, again, I know, because this rook is attacking this pawn on a7. Pawn goes here. Again, if I was white in this position, I would probably go b5. If you notice right now, this rook is attacking this pawn, but it's not safe to take it because of this knight, right? So if the pawn moves to b5, it attacks the knight, and if this knight ever moves, well, guess what? This knight is not protecting the a7 pawn anymore, so that means we can safely take it, and this doesn't look too good for black. So because of that, I would have castled on the king side. But let's see what actually happened in the game. Pawn goes to h3. It's attacking this bishop, and then black moves the pawn to h5. Black is trying to get fancy right now. The idea is if the pawn takes, which white did, then the black pawn takes it back, and then the idea is this rook is it has an open file. It's controlling these two squares next to this king, and black can get a very strong attack. But black needs to know what he's doing because he's sacrificing a bishop for this. So let's see what happened. The knight goes here. Okay, so that's good. And let's see what happens now. So the queen goes to h4, and it seems like this is a very strong move because black is actually threatening checkmate. This seems to be very scary. White decided to go g3, and this is a big mistake because black decided to just move the queen to h2, and then that's also checkmate. Also notice that the queen can also go to h1, and this is also checkmate too. But there's actually a way for white to stop this checkmate. Do you see how? You need to consider all checks. So the best move for white, instead of moving the pawn to g3, is to move this bishop here. the bishop takes the pawn, and if you notice right now, the bishop, it's checking the king, and then once this king moves, then this bishop can go to h3, and then guess what? This stops the checkmate. The queen cannot go to h2 or h1 anymore. Yeah, so that's what white should have done, but instead white did not see the bishop taking the pawn on g4, and instead white moved the pawn to g3, and then black moved the queen to h2, and then that's checkmate. So as a recap, this is what needs to happen. Knight out, that's very good. Just remember, let's get this bishop out first, then move the pawn. Just remember, in this position, let's move this pawn up to d5 to control and attack the center. And then the other thing is just remember about asking questions such as, if I ask, can I safely capture a piece? The knight can safely take this pawn. Pay attention to pinned pieces. The knight is pinned to the king. So that means we can safely take the pawn on e4. The other thing is, if you can safely capture a piece, go ahead and take it. Okay, that's very, very important. Just the other thing is, remember to it's very risky to castle on the queen side if your opponent's rook is attacking the pawn on a7. That's pretty risky. But okay, the other thing is, be very, very careful. You always want to ask, like, can my opponent safely capture a piece? The bishop can safely take this pawn. So in this position, what I would probably do in this position is I would probably maybe move the pawn to f5, so the pawn is protecting this pawn. That's what I would probably do. But yep, you've got to consider all checks. That's very, very important. And I hope you found this video to be helpful. I hope you like watching my videos. If you would like to support my channel, all you need to do is to go click the support my channel button. On this page, then you can give a donation. Thanks in advance if you do that. If you like watching my videos, then I also invite you to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.